We want to bring in NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez and NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel. Gabe, I'm going to start with you. This is obviously a critical moment for Ukraine. This meeting is unlike anything we have ever seen in the White House or among world leaders here in America. At times, so difficult to watch, frankly. Talk about where things go from an exchange like that to ultimately what the U.S. will do. Do we have any indication whether they will calm down behind closed doors and actually talk about something productive and reach a productive plan?
Hi there, Ellison and Vicky. Well, that is the huge question right now. And as you said, that exchange was nothing short of remarkable. Just such a heated exchange. And some context here, what you didn't see is before that exchange happened, before things deteriorated so much, that meeting was off to a good start with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy calling this a good first step for Ukraine, talking about this minerals deal and seeming to be very friendly with Donald Trump. But as you saw, with when J.D. Vance, the vice president, interjected there, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, he interjected and corrected him and talked about how Russia had invaded Crimea back in 2014, and then things deteriorated from there. There are so many questions right now about where we go from here. We were told to expect that both President Zelenskyy and President Trump were supposed to have a private lunch at this point before having a scheduled joint press conference in just a short time. I just spoke with a White House official who says that they are not aware of any cancellation of that press conference, but that remains to be seen. This was seen as an existential moment for Ukraine. Of course, we know the back and forth of the last several weeks, even with President Trump referring to Volodymyr Zelenskyy as a, quote, dictator, then laughing that off yesterday, saying, did I say that? As he saw this minerals deal coming to fruition. Now, I asked another White House official what the initial response inside the building was to what just transpired in the Oval Office, and this official said, America first happened. So there are a lot of questions about where we move from here, whether this press conference will happen in just a short time, but a seismic exchange right now in the Oval Office, and a lot of questions about Ukraine's future right now.
I mean, Richard, you know, listening to President Trump and Vice President Vance telling President Zelenskyy, you need to be thankful, seemingly suggesting you owe us. We didn't have to give you any assistance. We didn't have to give you military aid. Ukrainians would argue, actually, we had an agreement in the 1990s, in 1994, the Budapest Memorandum, that the United States signed saying, if you give up your nuclear arsenal, we will give you security assurances. They would say that is why the United States, the UK, and I believe France gave them military support after Crimea was invaded in 2014, and that is still why they have, in Ukrainians' views, an obligation to be involved now. Walk us through some of the history here, and when you heard that exchange, what went through your head? What do you think your sources in Ukraine will make of it?
So I just got back from Ukraine, and I was watching this moment develop, because this is all about ending the war, about creating some sort of ceasefire or peace agreement. And part of that was President Trump's demand that had initially been a Ukrainian request, but which quickly morphed into this minerals deal. And many Ukrainians thought that President Zelenskyy was being sort of dragged to the White House to sign this deal that could be potentially very expensive for Ukraine, and that President Zelenskyy was trying to, before he put pen to paper, get as many promises, security guarantees as he possibly could. And then in that moment that you just showed on television, things just broke down. J.D. Vance seems like was the provocateur here. And then President Zelenskyy did not back down. He did not want it to seem like he was the weaker party, that he has nothing to offer. Ukrainian troops have been the one, after all, fighting and dying on the front lines every day. Every day there are Russian attacks. Every day there are Ukrainian and Russian casualties. So he was already perceived by many Ukrainians as having been summoned to the United States to sign a deal that made Ukrainians nervous. Now he was effectively humiliated by the White House on American soil, saying, you Ukrainians would be able to do nothing without us. You have no cards. President Zelenskyy, and by the way, English is not his first language. So to have this kind of two-on-one argument against the President of the United States and the Vice President in the Oval Office or in, let's say, in Washington in general is extraordinarily difficult. And then President Zelenskyy kept holding his ground until ultimately he was overtalked by J.D. Vance and President Trump. So many Ukrainians will have seen President Zelenskyy there being humiliated, spoken down to as he was trying to get security agreements for his country because he doesn't trust, and Ukrainians do not trust Vladimir Putin. And that seems to be the fundamental difference. President Trump was saying that Putin wants a deal, and either way, Trump is going to guarantee that deal. It's all about him. And then he tried to express sympathy for Putin. Look what happened to Putin all over these years because of President Trump's internal problems with the Russiagate and impeachment cases. So this was a disaster for Zelenskyy. But the question is, can they get this over the line? Will they sign that deal? And does it ultimately hurt him or help him at home? People in Ukraine might see this as him standing up, not going down easily, not being humiliated willingly at the White House.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.